I sat there at my Underwood typewriter. But I wished that something real would happen. Some disaster, some storm, some heinous act, some crazed person would come running across the grass, waving a pistol and shouting gibberish. And I would stand there, and I would look at it and remember everything. And then I would tell the story. All right. And suddenly the sky turned dark and a tornado came up and it picked me up and it sat down in the front yard of fundamentalists who accepted me as a gift from God. And this was back, my mother was in the circus. She was a high wire walker and a sharpshooter in the Olsen Brothers Johnson & Jensen Circus, which traveled by train. I grew up the son of a Swedish sharecropper in North Dakota. I got on a toboggan in January, and there was a prevailing wind out of the northwest, and it just blew me down to Minneapolis, and it just seemed like too much effort to go back. I was a bus child. I rode a school bus. It was driven by a drunken man named Jimmy, who would steer with his knees, and he would drink coffee that was laced with what he called flavoring, but which was... When I travel around and do the show from other parts of the country, I've been able to halfway get people to believe other stories about where I came from and what I did. I love to write stories like that. He walks into the theater, his mind teeming with brilliant ideas, he'd like to think.
Hello.
Hello. Hello, hello. We're on an extremely fast track, just not to make it stressful, but we are 2 hours away, and we have some duets. So if it doesn't work, it doesn't work. Pick it up somewhere in the middle. It's a live radio show, a Prairie Home Companion. We write it on Thursday and Friday, rehearse it Friday night, do it on Saturday with a lot of actors, musicians. Make the lyrics unintelligible. A band, all of them on stage, all of it being performed as it's being broadcast, which is a sight to see. The maestro been taken off to jail. And somehow this odd show, which is sort of a museum of broadcasting, has endured for all these decades with 3 or 4 million listeners, so far as we can tell. Troops. Oh, oh, oh. And the obligation to the public is to maintain some lightheartedness, which is better if it's genuine.
Who are you? Over here. Oh, yes. I'm the composer of Angry Fruit.
And so the obligation is to amuse yourself.
Let's not go there.
Every week I do about a 20-minute monologue, The News from Lake Wobegon, which is a town that I used to think was fictitious, and now I'm not sure. You take your kids up after supper up to that high hill, and you stand looking down on the town down below you, and you see the steeple of Our Lady of Perpetual Responsibility. And then I started to feel warmly about the characters, and they started to evolve from types into individuals. And don't want to be like Darlene down at the Chatterbox Cafe, and been looking for somebody for a while in all the worst places. Some cuts in there, I think we better give them a new copy of it. point in a person's career where, if you're lucky, you are extremely busy. And you enter into this lovely, sort of hyper-productive time. And you're working faster than you ever could imagine working before.
Commercials?
Yeah. You race through these with no...
So to be able to do this and to have the prospect of, of doing it for pay, this is a fortunate life.
Just gonna put a shaven haircut on that?
I loved summer when I was a kid so much because when school was out, that meant that you could read as much as you wanted to. This was the summer that I think I became a writer. I was 13 years old. I wore steel-rimmed glasses, and I was a very solemn boy. Not that I was sad, but I simply was paying attention. I had been given a typewriter by my Uncle George. He gave me his old Underwood typewriter. I had a secret place under the stairs where my parents could not see me because they were worried that I didn't go outside. I just wanted to do one thing. I just wanted to find things to write about. We do a Prairie Home Companion out of St. Paul, but of course we travel around because a writer is supposed to get out and mingle with people and see things. See things like rhubarb.
It just grows all on its own. I don't fertilize or nothing. It's on the south side of my house.
That is the largest rhubarb leaf I've ever seen in my life.
He's not a fancy kind of guy.
No flies on you now.
He's ordinary. He likes rhubarb like the rest of us.
To speak for your people, the people that you come from. They're raising children, they're keeping homes, they're keeping life together. And they have a certain wit and style and a tone of voice when they're in a good mood, when they're happy. And to be able to represent that in your own voice, the sound that your parents, that your cousins, that your friends, that your family make, when they're really clicking, when they're really cooking, that's a challenge, I think, for a writer.
We have rhubarb hot dog relish, rhubarb ketchup, rhubarb soup, rhubarb beans, and several rhubarb drinks. It's one of those things that comes up very early in the spring. And so it's something that you get that first taste of spring, that little burst of spring in your mouth that goes, wow, wake up, it's spring in Minnesota.
Wow! Why they put this food way over here? It's like they're trying to discourage us from eating. I want a rhubarb pie.
Oh.
Wouldn't this be a good time for a piece of rhubarb pie, yes? Nothing gets the taste of shame and humiliation out of your mouth quite like bebop and rebop rhubarb pie. Yes, one little thing can revive a guy, and that is a piece of a rhubarb pie. Serve it up nice and hot. Maybe things aren't as bad as you thought.
Mama's little baby loves rhubarb, rhubarb, bebop, rebop, rhubarb pie. Mama's little baby loves rhubarb, rhubarb, bebop, rebop, rhubarb pie.
A bebop, a rebop, rhubarb pie.
It's a symbol of home and family, and the fact that it's not widely available commercially. Would it be ruined if it went big time, or does it need to stay in our backyards and cooked by grandmas for it to retain its spiritual qualities?
Right. What I like to think of with rhubarb, it's kind of a metaphor, because I was an English major.
A metaphor.
It's a metaphor.
Yes.
And I think it's a metaphor for finding happiness in your own backyard.
Very well put.
Garrison Keillor, if you think about it, he did his sojourn in New York, And that was a great experiment and adventure for him. But he came back home, and I thought about it later, and I thought, well, you know, maybe rhubarb is a metaphor for him finding happiness in his own backyard.
You are my sunshine, my only sunshine. You make me happy when skies are gray. You'll never know, dear, how much I love you. Please don't take my sunshine away.
I come from country people who woke up with the sun every morning and who washed their faces in cold water out of steel basins, and they drank their coffee black. And they were silent as they ate, and they did not look each other in the eye. And they had kerosene lamps, which were not to be wasted. And when the kerosene lantern was blown out, it was very dark indeed. I've always wanted to get more than one life, to get a St. Paul life, but also a New York life, and a cowboy life, and a show business life, and a literary life, and a secret life. I've lived a lot of lives vicariously as a reader and invented a few lives of my own.
The king of Kansas City, no thanks Omaha, thanks a lot. Kansas City star, that's what I are. Yodeled lady, I've seen the car.
I seem to remember this town, but I can't remember if I've been here before. I feel like a man with amnesia. You know who I am or where I've been? I grew up in a ravine. There was a dry creek bed that was not far from our house, and we hung out there for years. It was not so deep, but it was so secret. We talked about the things that interested boys. We talked about death. We talked about crime. We talked about women and their strange ways. Boys who, in the presence of their families, were absolutely silent and obedient, said the most amazing things. You could tell stories for the rest of your life based on things that were told to you in that ravine. Yes, it's me calling from Savannah and just walking around. I will try you on your other phone. Talk to you later. Bye. People have too many phones, I tell you. The writers who I gravitated toward were Southern writers, like Flannery O'Connor, Eudora Welty, and William Faulkner, who created his own place in America, Yoknapatawpha County, and got his readers to believe in it. I aspired to be like them. I failed, but I aspired to be like them and not to tell stories from an elevated point of view. You are Emily.
Yeah.
You're good at that. What did you write papers about, if I may ask?
What we want our lives to be like in 5 years, and how we're going to promote ourselves.
Oh, that sort of
That sort of. Nothing exciting.
Nothing academic.
No, not yet.
Nothing that you actually had to go to the library and research.
No.
So you all wrote papers that were optimistic about your future in 5 years? None of you predicted a decline, a descent into the into the darkness? Obsessive compulsive behavior or addiction or
inappropriate relationships? No? Nothing like that.
Nothing like that.
And you all forecast success and
Oh, yeah, you know, Tony
satisfaction?
Awards and...
You start with what you know, but writing is a process of discovery. It's not as if, we're simply taking a plate out of our heads and laying it down on paper and printing from it. We're not. Writing is an act of discovery. And the moment you start with a character, who may be yourself or maybe somebody else, but you start with a character and you learn about that character by writing about that character, and you wind up in places you never thought you were going to go when you started out. I mean, that's the whole reason for writing, is for discovery. You do not know what you yourself think until you put it into words. The only thing that I can do is write. And so I do. I write a weekly newspaper column. I write a novel now and then. People tell me I work too hard, but I don't work nearly so hard as my mother worked, raising 6 children and cleaning and cooking and washing clothes. And then in the late summer, there's always a great orgy of canning. For my father's sake, who loved my mother's stewed tomatoes. He was a talented man, gifted with his hands, a carpenter and a mechanic. I set myself apart from them, thinking of their work as dull and menial, and imagining that the life of a writer was much more romantic and swashbuckling. And gradually, it dawned on me that in search of a brilliant career, I also found a great deal of BS. Compared to carpentry, there just is way too much nonsense. My ambition took me a long way, but once I got there, I wondered who I was.
Who can tell how it starts? Angry words and broken hearts, till silently we sit apart, you and I. But in a while the anger's gone, and we forget who's right or wrong. One of us will end it all with just a smile. We believe in new beginnings, giving in and forgiving. We believe in happy endings, you and I. Just a word is all it takes, then in time the silence breaks, and looking back it makes us ache for what we've done. So we cling together now.
We used to tour in these vans. You're too young to remember that, but
Me?
the truth. We used to drive all over the place.
Well, no seats in the back here.
Yeah.
We had beds.
We used to lie across these things and sleep.
Yeah, exactly.
I don't know how we ever survived it.
We were younger.
Alcohol, I think.
Alcohol may have something to do with it, but we were much younger. It was, if we still had to do it, we'd quit. We've been doing it since 1975. But we knew a bunch of Minneapolis musicians, and one of them said, you know, there's this guy who's doing starting a radio show, and he's something special. We should try to get on the show. So we made the phone call, and Garrison answered the phone, and he was answering his phone. He was doing all the work himself. He had a morning show. It was that he had to do every day, and then he did the radio show as well on the weekend. And he said, well, I've got to come see you. So he drove 60 miles to come see us play. You know, he's not interested in having big stars on the show. that doesn't make any difference to him. It's not what he's interested in having. When you hear this performer, you can hear something from deep inside coming out, and that's what he wants.
When I wake up to sleep no more, I'll have young people on a beautiful shore. When they think of all the ages, run through my door. When I wake up to sleep no more.
You know, you don't have to be the best ever at anything to get his attention. You have to just be yourself and bring something that's authentic from you.
And real.
And real.
So what's the guitar you're proudest of?
Well, I just made one for Doc Watson.
Did you?
Garrison is a great observer. He's a great listener, and he's always listening.
But he had me inlay a rose on it. And Doc lived pretty close by, so he comes to my shop. And he had that rose inlaid on it, I think, for Rosalie.
Still cranky as ever? And...
Well, he has his spells. But while he was getting his new guitar, he's pretty
happy.
Pretty good mood.
Yeah. Good.
Well, he can really focus in on what people are like fairly quickly. With Wayne and Helen, he pretty much knew who they were and what they were about and was able to find out a lot about them.
What do you sing?
Are you tired of me, my darling?
I'm singing.
Do you think bloom has departed from the cheeks you once thought fair?
I once fell in love with a girl who I rode to school with on the school bus. And after being in love with her for most of the 11th grade, I found the seat next to her empty one morning, and I sat next to her. I was so excited I could hardly breathe. We were almost to school before I got up my nerve to set my arm behind her, not touching her, but in a position where if she didn't object, I could have moved it forward so it just was slightly on her shoulders. But before I did, she looked at me and she said, "What?" I didn't know how to answer that question. I still don't.
Are you tired of me, my darling? Answer only with your eyes.
Boy, you have a beautiful voice.
Thank you.
You have a gorgeous voice. Well, come play on the show. Come play guitar.
I would love to do that.
All right.
Well, thank you, sir.
Boy, that was a beautiful song.
Yeah, we'd love to come sing sometime.
He likes to have on blues, but roots blues, and country, but roots country, and the real bluegrass, and the real, any genre of music that we approach. He kind of peels away the popular extrapolations of that roots music, and so they can tell, like, this is a guy, he's not talking about the top 40. Garrison kind of assembled this band. This isn't a band that existed anywhere else. Everybody isn't the same, and maybe the differences is what makes it unique. All right, we'll carve this up and...
Yeah.
Did you have any interest in those other little bits that we threw in between the wassail?
I didn't hear them.
They were kind of Kansas City Blues.
Yeah, I'm sure.
Okay.
I'm sure. I'll come down and.
Is bossa nova too far?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
But the samba isn't.
Samba? Don't jinka dinka dink dinka dinka, or no, what is it?
But I would make it mostly percussion.
Okay.
If you want to do a Latin chorus
Okay.
of wassailing.
Okay.
I would make it almost a percussion solo with just stops.
Okay. Thanks.
Well, I sure sound like I know a lot about music, don't I? That's great. English major telling a pianist what to do. Being an English major prepares you for impersonating authority.
The bandies play. Honey, could we ask for more? Whoa, 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 whoa. Coming to you live from the grandstand here at the Minnesota State Fair in St. Paul. It's a Prairie Home Companion. Joining us now on our stage here at the Minnesota State Fair is a young woman who, when she came to Minnesota with her family 20-some years ago, they performed right over there in the
band shell.
The band
Yeah,
shell,
yeah.
right. I was trying to think of the word. And you won first prize in the amateur.
We did.
You did. Please welcome Geraldine Steele here on our stage. Geraldine.
I used to smoke, I used to drink, I used to smoke and drink and dance a hoochie coo. I used to smoke and drink and dance a hoochie coo. Yes, I did. But now I'm standing on this corner praying for me and you.
But Garrison comes from a singing family. I come from a singing family, and both of us started in the church. And with his family singing in the Lutheran church and singing hymns, and my family in the Church of God in Christ denomination and singing gospel and hymns and spirituals, it has been an unusual fit. Every time I'm singing on stage with him, there's a feeling that rushes over you. We may not be able to put our finger on it. Some people may call it God. Some people may call it universal love or some type of spirit in it. But it is spiritual.
My soul has often found relief.
He does not allow all of us into his inner circle. But if I can only share space with him for a moment in this time, then that space is big enough.
First prize for Miss Geraldine Steele. Good to be with you here. Well, I come out to the state fair to eat corn dogs, of course, and see the people and feel centrifugal force. Just get on a ride that goes on and on and on and on. One day of riot, then I'll be quiet. Go back to Lake Wobegon.
We got blue, we got your colors just for you.
We got pink, we got blue, we got colors just for you.
It's the last outpost of rhymed poetry.
I grew up in a sweet country that was one country, and so there were certain points where all roads led and everybody came together. The public school was one of those places. In Anoka, Minnesota, some children wound up going to Dartmouth or Stanford or Carleton or Princeton, but they spent their formative years in the public schools with the children of farmers and carpenters and cops and firemen. They all rode together on the big yellow school bus, and they cheered for the teams, and they ate macaroni and cheese in the lunchroom. A valuable experience that gives you a tribal feeling.
Let's start out by standing and singing our Star-Spangled Banner.
Minnesota is a place where if you ask an audience to sing, they're going to do it. They were brought up to, like the Star-Spangled Banner, which, like our system of government, is much maligned and badly abused. But if you put it in the right key, which is the key of G, it works pretty well, and it's very moving. People get so much of their politics listening to other people rant and rave on the radio, sitting alone in a car, or reading somebody's blog. And the Star-Spangled Banner is one of those rare moments when we sing a song together, which means more for all of us joining in. We share a common tongue and a fondness for jokes, a love of American landscape, and we are a union.
Up next, Garrison Keillor. Each week for over 30 years, Garrison Keillor has delighted listeners with his Prairie Home Companion radio show. This is WNYC. And
When I was 13, 14 years old, my father took his Kodak camera off the shelf and he took pictures of all of us. The prints came back and I looked at mine and I destroyed it immediately. But it stays in my memory. Looking at this strange person, these spindly arms and this ugly plaid shirt. I looked at him and I thought, nobody's ever going to be your friend. You're going to wind up an old man living all by yourself in an old rusted green mobile home at the end of a long dirt road with a sign out at the highway that says no trespassing, but you don't need that sign. Nobody's going to come in there anyway. That's going to be your life. And then I thought, no, maybe radio.
Okay. Jerry Douglas, I think, is kind of a hot act. Okay. And then let's get them on a different mode. Okay. Jerry Douglas.
How are you, sir?
I've been listening to you since I was a kid.
I have heard that before.
I was a 10-year-old child.
You were?
And I heard you or somebody who sounded like you on the radio.
Somebody I sound like.
It was a big Zenith. It was a big Zenith floor model radio.
Oh, yeah.
I just put my ear right up to it. You make me feel young again.
When I was 18 and a freshman at the University of Minnesota, I got a job reading the news every day at 12 noon at the student radio station, WMMR. I sat there and I read the news in my best Edward R. Murrow voice. In May, we discovered that the transmitters of WMMR had been switched off for the entire school year. And so all of that year, I had been sitting in a studio reading the news to myself. It was sort of a blow, but when you're 18, you're pretty resilient. you're not easily discouraged. You commiserate with your friends, and then you move on.
Earlier this year, the Prairie Home Companion radio show was translated into a feature film through the eyes of Robert Altman.
My whole thing was to go into radio. I was radio writing, and then, but then a show called I Love Lucy came along, and that was the end of radio. It just became then television.
That was the end of radio?
There's a few pockets, certain around the country, Minnesota, Wisconsin, places like that.
It's my sense that you started as a writer and the radio kind of came out of that rather than the other way around.
It was an easy way to earn a living.
Radio is?
Oh, yes, gosh, yes. I mean, when I started out, it was easy. You just sat in the studio by yourself for half an hour, and then at the correct time, you said in a public radio voice, that was the Jupiter Symphony by Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart, George Szell conducting the Cleveland Orchestra. We now turn to music of Tchaikovsky. This was easy, and while Tchaikovsky and Mozart were playing, you could sit there and write.
I wrote a story about a family from New York, a microbiologist and his actress wife, and their son, who looked and walked and talked and thought and felt exactly like me. I sat in the back seat, and they were driving across the Midwest, and they forgot me at a gas station. And suddenly the sky turned dark, and a tornado came up, and it picked me up, and it carried me and dropped me uninjured in the yard of a Sanctified Brethren family. And a woman in a white satin gown holding a flaming torch came out, sang "Onward, Christian Soldiers," and asked me what I wanted. And I was going to tell them that I had to leave to look for my parents. And then the dog spoke to me. The dog said, "Stay." So I stayed. And I learned to be a Sanctified Brethren boy, but still I missed the life of glamour that I had known on New York's exclusive Upper West Side. My dad brought me to New York in the fall of 1953. I was 11 years old. He'd been stationed in New York when he was in the Army. He worked in the Army Post Office, which was down around Times Square, down here somewhere. We didn't come down to Broadway, my dad and I, because we were Christian people. So we wouldn't have done any of this. I think he liked being stationed here during the war, however. I think he loved the city secretly, though he could never bring himself to say so. But when he would shake his head, which he did back then, but he especially did after I moved here and he and my mother came out to visit, when he would shake his head and say, "I just don't see how people can live like this," he was saying it with admiration, I think, and curiosity. I bought this apartment back in 1988 when I moved to New York City. I got a job writing at the New Yorker magazine, an office which is just a couple miles downtown from here. Walked out here on the terrace and looked out at the street and the trees and the rooftops and thought this was it. Water towers, just like in Lake Wobegon.
It's been raining.
Water towers.
We hope that the weather may yield. It's a beautiful, beautiful summer here in the valley of the Root. Beautiful June, full moon. Even if it rains, let's all stay put. Yes, of course we will. Whoa, whoa, whoa.
Well, we're a town of 780 people. And when we got this call from the Prairie Home Companion people that said, Garrison Keillor's coming and he's bringing his whole show, we thought, oh, that'll be great. We have a theater. And they said, no, we need a place for 2,000 people. Well, then reality kind of set in and we had to find a venue. We happen to have this softball field that hasn't been used for a long time and thought that's kind of a natural amphitheater, so we convinced them to hold the event here.
It's like, gee, do you think they'll close the road for that? And we talked to the county, and they said, sure, we'll do that.
Well, it's been a quiet week in Lake Wobegon, Minnesota, my hometown. Out in the center of Minnesota. This is why we wanted to come down to Lanesboro, because it looks so much like Lake Wobegon. You wouldn't want to do your show in Lake Wobegon itself, because then you'd be telling stories to people who were in the stories in the first place. But this is enough like Lake Wobegon to remind me of where I come from. Town founded by Unitarian missionaries who had gone out to the prairie to try to convert the Ojibwe Indians through the use of interpretive dance. The German Catholics came in. They built this great towering church. We grew up in its shadows.
Adventures with Scripture.
And on the 8th day, the Lord God looked out upon creation and saw that something was missing. And so he created a town, and he called it Lanesboro.
I will make a river to flow through it with a dam. Canoeists will curse the dam, and they will learn patience. And I will make the valley fruitful and scenic. And there shall be cafes serving mixed greens with balsamic dressing and broiled salmon and flourless chocolate cake.
All I know is that he'll ask questions, and so we'll try and answer them.
You were married the same year I was born.
Really?
1942?
Mm-hmm. So you've been married for as long as I've been alive.
Yeah.
Unreal, isn't it?
It don't seem possible sometimes. I never dreamed I was going to live this old, but you never know.
You two both seem awfully sharp for 87 years old.
Thank you very much. He's 88. I'm married to an older man.
21 days younger than I am.
All right. We have written you a waltz, a little Norwegian waltz. Rich Dworsky wrote this. This is an anniversary gift for your 65th anniversary.
I'm gonna live forever. I'm gonna cross that river. I'm gonna catch tomorrow night. You're gonna wanna hold me just like I always told you. Gonna miss me when I'm gone. You fathers and you mothers, be good to one another. Try and raise your children right.
Well, actually, it started out when I was 3 years old. I started singing in the Sunday school choir, and I've always loved to sing. I live outside of Lanesboro in the country, I live on a dairy farm, and I have for all my life. Oh, I come from a Lutheran church with all Norwegians, so we all kind of sit in the back pews, just kind of all to ourselves. So he's trying to encourage me to get out there and be a little bit more excited and more emotional.
She's a shot putter, and where she's going to become fragile and needy now.
I don't know if you can hear me or if you're even there. I don't know if you will listen to a humble prayer. They tell me I am just an outcast. I shouldn't speak to you. Still I see your face and wonder, were you once an outcast too?
That's a terrific introduction. You're doing great. That's perfect.
I don't know if there's a reason.
A person doesn't live only in his own time. We live in our own time, and we also live in the past. It's the only healthy way to live. And we get back to the past by listening to old songs and singing them.
God help the outcast, the tattered and torn, seeking an answer to why they were born.
Was that all real, that life that we lived in that little town? As we drive up through the brown fields over the hills and come up towards the grain elevator and the lake, did that all happen? That life where we all lived in that little house, all of us kids, and we went to school and we played in the backyard and it got cold and the snow fell. Was that all real? We wonder if that all really happened, what we think happened in the past.
The children of
That's the news from Lake Wobegon, where all the women are strong, all the men are good looking, and all the children are above average.
Well, I found all sorts of ways to get myself into trouble, and one way was to start a live radio show out of St. Paul, Minnesota, back in the summer of 1974. It was a grand way to plunge into deep water and to do something I was hardly qualified to do.
5 minutes.
And thanks to the fact that I keep trying to do it right, I've lasted now for 30-some years. You don't want to retire when you're just starting to get a grip on it. You know what I mean?
1 minute, 1 minute.
All right. What are we, 1 minute? Hey, Prudence, you all set?
What's happening?
Revised on the far right.
Curtain goes up on the music cue.
We're starting with
I hear that old piano from down the avenue. When I was a kid, we listened to all kinds of radio shows, Fibber McGee and Molly, and Jack Benny, Bob and Ray. When I started a Prairie Home Companion, I made it out of little pieces of old shows I listened to. Now we have listeners in their 20s and 30s who look on me as a sort of inventor of the form.
Coming to you live from the Fitzgerald.
Eventually, when everybody who remembers Bob and Ray dies off, I may be regarded as a genius. I don't know.
Let's take a look at this in slow motion right now.
It's a novelty for people to see what radio used to look like back when they did shows like this.
He reaches up for it, and now these 350-pound linemen, these golden gophers are coming out.
It's like he's, baking the bread fresh right there, and he tinkers with the ingredients every time. There's nothing regular, and he's restless, so the show changes all the time. Like falling off a cliff.
he says, a man jumped off a cliff. Now, when I start that, I don't know what he's going to hit. I don't know if he's going in the ocean, and followed by sharks, or whether it's going to be a puddle of water. By doing it with my mouth, I can make it expressive, and he knows that, so I can play with it more. And he likes that sort of handcrafted, that authenticity. There's all these nuances we can put in the moment that you just can't create by computer.
I was an engineer on duty at Minnesota Public Radio, and I worked the 6 in the morning to 2 o'clock shift. And while I was working there, Garrison started doing a morning radio show. He was by himself. He ran everything, what's called combo. He ran the microphones and the turntables. And it got bigger and bigger and bigger. And now I've been doing it for 30-some years, doing sound effects for the show.
And over here is the ride they call the churn. This is, kids are pinned to the side of it by centrifugal force. It goes round and round.
We've worked together so long. He knows what I can and can't do. I can't do elephant trumping very well, but he'll still use it just because it's kind of funny. I can't do it.
And there's your elephant, and you got to get your elephant exactly right in that tone exactly right. And if you're off, it's just an older guy who just ate lunch. That's all that is. So there's a lot of stress.
And when I look up Google, I find Barney Google and his googly eyes. A pop novelty song of the 1920s.
And there's some voices that we do, and then there's layers. Like the librarian she's very precise, and she's very well-spoken. And if you just take her a little bit older and a little cracky, she turns into a witch.
An old woman who's cooking up rhubarb in a big kettle over an open fire.
People coming in here from all over, coming in to eat our rhubarb. Well, they'll get a surprise.
Ma'am?
The key to radio, no matter how silly the script is to kind of keep it in the moment so it sounds real. I mean, no matter how ridiculous it is, it's got to sound real. So any kind of conversation has little bits and pieces, give and take, reactions and things that he doesn't have to write in everything, you know.
They've asked me to compose an anthem for Lent.
Oh. Who lent you your clothes?
No,
what?
Lent, Pops.
Oh. Lent. That's what I said. Whoever lent you those pants did you no favors, that's for sure.
You know, there were jokes in some of those scripts.
I'm expecting Mr. Fellows to come over, the music director at Third Lutheran Church. He's going to be...
where is Third Lutheran?
I didn't know if they would work or not.
Well, it used to be called First Lutheran. But, you know, they're Lutherans, so they were more comfortable being third. And
then you can hear them work, and so that's a marker. And so you're going to keep that, and you can rip away a lot of other stuff.
I'll make a few cuts, okay?
I heard your secret smile.
I'm Nora's manager, Sylvia. Thanks for coming, Mr. Noir.
Because it's live and because it's a product of a creative mind that keeps churning out new ways of looking at things, so you're kind of flying by the seat of your pants.
Exactly. Listen. You'll hear it. Listen. It's coming soon.
Shut up your cell phone.
She seemed to be anticipating it.
And then the other thing, of course, is Garrison, is developing the show as we do it. This isn't stage management the way any other stage management is. It's about having all the options available to him so he can just pick it from them whenever he wants to. So our job is just to have everything ready and to have a plan and to work with him as much as we can so that we know what to have available to him next.
Garrison's definitely the hub on the wheel. I mean, he creates the pieces and orchestrates where they're going to go in the show. It's a jigsaw puzzle in motion,
So we know when something is going to change. We can tell by the way he's acting, the way he talks on stage. If he's stretching or looking for something, we'll try and figure out what it is he's looking for. The more that anybody works with him, the easier it gets. But he's always been a tough nut to figure out.
So you learn little things like when he does this during the monologue, he's close to the end.
I don't want to go past 10:30.
Yeah, I think we're probably looking at 45-ish.
I come from this town of dark people. I did my best to escape from them. And then somewhere back there, 10, 20 years ago, actually it was when I had my first child, I began to be reconciled to them. When I spoke to my child and I could hear my father's voice come out of my mouth, then I knew it was time to go back home and to figure out what all of this was about.
When I was 40 years old, I bought a big green frame house with a porch on Goodrich Avenue in St. Paul, and it only made me more restless. Then I jumped to an apartment in Copenhagen, where I plotted my next escape to Central Park West in New York, and then to a log cabin in Wisconsin, and then landed back here in St. Paul. And here I have stopped for the time being.
A beautiful day.
Shame to have to go work indoors on a day like today. Boom, boom. Summit Avenue. Boulevard of Broken Dreams. When my grandpa rode the streetcar to St. Paul to take out his naturalization papers, the boy in knee pants swinging his book strap on the street corner might have been F. Scott Fitzgerald. F. Scott Fitzgerald, who said, "What people are ashamed of usually makes a good story." This is the Fitzgerald Theater in St. Paul, formerly known as the World Theater, when a Prairie Home Companion moved in here in 1978.
Burn on the popper and turn on the heat. Put your tops in.
I'd had the idea for the show a few years before when I was down in Nashville, Tennessee, writing a story for the New Yorker magazine about the Grand Ole Opry. I thought, you'd go back and do a show just like that in Minnesota. It was one of those haphazard decisions you make so casually that shapes the next 30, 40 years of your life.
I think it's the jokes, the stories, the music, part of being a Minnesotan, I guess.
I'm a Norwegian bachelor farmer that grew up in a town of 300 people, so his stories are my stories.
People come up and talk to me here. Strangers talk to me, which may not seem like a big deal, but to me it's huge. I write and do shows for an audience of people, most of whom I will never meet.
I compiled them into a book, and then the last.
But in St. Paul, they walk over to me and they tell me things like, "I heard what you said about such and such," and being spoken to by people as an equal. It's the great unexpected payoff of being semi-famous. I moved back in 1998 because my wife and I had a little girl, and we decided that she was entitled to be brought up in Minnesota and to have aunts and uncles and cousins and grandparents whom you cannot hire. You more or less have to rely on the originals.
Come here. How was your swimming? How come your hair's wet?
I didn't know.
This is a song I wrote for my little girl. I had a little child when I was 55 years old. She's about to turn 9 years old. I wrote this song back when she was a year and a half.
I remember I changed her diaper, and then I was looking around for a clean one. She walked across the freshly waxed kitchen floor, and I looked and I saw, as she was walking away, that she wasn't quite done yet. And I made a kind of a sliding, diving catch. I caught both of them in one hand. She looked back over her shoulder, she laughed. She'd never seen anybody do this before. I said, darling, I hope you know you're the only one I would ever do this for. I believe this is the truth. Only for you, only for you, I hold up my head. Great audience, you know that? Only for you.
As your family drive a powder mill, as your family drive a powder mill, well, if your family's driving, you know you're satisfied, and they're the real hot of powder mill.
In Minnesota, we get home when we get home. It's no big deal. And if we're caught in traffic and we miss the sales meeting, it doesn't matter that much in the end. Our impact on the world is slight.
As your family drive a powder mill, we do.
So take life as a comedy, play it for laughs. You die, there's a sort of decent grief. A few people really do suffer from your absence, but the impact on the greater world is not that big. You do not leave a big hole. They dig a hole and they put you in it.
All true Minnesotans know how to do a loon call. It's how we know each other when we get away from our state, right? And the airports of Los Angeles, Washington, D.C., New York City, London, Paris. This is how Minnesotans congregate when they get lost or separated. The loon call. Sometimes a loon passes wind.
And number one, I was impressed by the great warble sound that Anna provided for us.
Thank you. Congratulations to all of our contestants in the loon calling contest.
I'm a guy in a suit now. I'm happy to be a guy in a suit with a white shirt, a mostly white shirt, and just to be a regular person. I did not, in the end, follow the advice of my graduation speakers and follow the road less traveled or march to my own drummer. I'm happy to be a part of the group. I just think it's one of the great pleasures of life.
People who did the meatloaf for us tonight, Harry and Suzanne. This is their last year doing meatloaf. They've done it year after year after year. Any volunteers to do meatloaf next year? Meatloaf for 2,000 people.
A dark night in a city that knows how to keep its secrets. But on the 12th floor of the Acme building, one man is still trying to find the answers to life's persistent questions. Guy Noir, Private Eye.
It was December and got myself a cheap ticket to New York City, flying Manitoba Airlines by way of Vancouver into Schenectady. Took a bus into the city, but I didn't care. I just wanted to see Times Square, see some lights, see some people.
I came to New York in 1966, the fall of 66. I was 24. I was a graduate student in English.
floundering, liable to be drafted to Vietnam, fearful. And one of the things I was most fearful of was living an ordinary life. I wanted to be a writer. I wanted to write for the New Yorker magazine. Had wanted to since I was 13. I got off the bus wearing my one wool suit and carrying a cardboard suitcase. Started out walking. I learned a lot that week. I learned that walking is a great technique for getting rid of bad feelings, fear and sadness. You just walk, and you keep on walking, and eventually it goes away. I never did get that job with the New Yorker. It was one of those fortuitous rejections. If the New Yorker had given me a job writing talk of the town pieces, I might have lasted there for 15 or 20 years. And right now I would be a retired alcoholic copy editor from the Daily News, and taken up gin and tonic as a hobby. I'd be sitting in a bar just off of Broadway here, one of those dark little bars for serious drinkers.
It's the week before Christmas out there in Kansas. It's cold, it's miserable. You hear a voice coming from what? It's your dog.
Hey, down here. Huh? It's your dog talking, old Shep. Listen, do something nice for yourself for once. Why not go to New York?
New York? Well, you're going to be out of your mind. I can't leave this place. What?
Oh, sure you can. I can handle this.
Shep.
Take the missus and head for the Big Apple, Big Road Apple. Have yourself a wee of a time.
Welcome to you.
And up you go, up to your suite on the 89th floor, and you look out the window.
Oh, look at that, would ya?
Boy, oh,
Oh,
boy.
gosh, take a picture.
Okay.
Okay, take another one from this window now.
Oh, you
Yeah.
get tickets to Radio City for the big Christmas show. See the Rockettes dancing there in front of the nativity scene. And you get yourself to a Broadway show, a big Broadway show.
Sun'll come out tomorrow.
Oh, you take that carriage ride through Central Park. You head for the Museum of Modern Art.
Oh, yes, the emotional vocabulary of grayness is particularly rich in this work here entitled Sky Number 44.
And then you're off to the opera. And then to a cabaret for a light nightcap.
It had to be you. It had to be you.
I like to hang out in New York City on the Upper West Side and walk up Broadway, past the street where George Gershwin wrote Rhapsody in Blue, and the building Isaac Bashevis Singer lived in when he wrote his stories of Jewish village life in Europe, the hotel where Holden Caulfield went to meet the prostitute.
Going back?
No, thanks. And in New York, I live in a little village on the Upper West Side. Everything is just a short walk away. New York looks like a big city, but up close it feels like a whole series of encampments.
These are Christmas oranges. Pretty luxurious.
You walk into the deli, and there's Emanuel Axe, one of the greatest pianists on this planet,
You don't have my cheese here.
looking over the cheese selection.
Do you have any Wisconsin cheddar?
Yes, I do. Should be in the case.
Over here it is. I see it. I never saw white Wisconsin cheddar.
Very nice. Mild?
Mild?
Yes.
You don't have sharp?
Thank you.
Thank you, dear. We live in Minnesota for family and for business, and we live in New York for the peace and quiet and the stimulation. 10 minutes, you're in town, and you want to get to work and do something, make something of yourself.
Oh, my sweet, sweet old someone.
I think you'd have to ask everybody individually what draws them to it. It's mainly Garrison's Lake Wobegon stories.
Honey, could we ask for more?
And when he gets to that point, you can just feel the audience settle down and settle in. It's okay, here's what we came for.
And we remembered Mr. Peterson's dog, his English Springer Spaniel, Gunner, who his wife bought for him to go with him out fishing because the dog was an AA dog, and the dog could sniff alcohol. And the dog would go after you if you drank. And he got around it by training the dog to dive in through the hole in the ice and go down and catch fish.
As a rule, I would sit here at this hour Saturday morning, and I would write, "It's been a quiet week in Lake Wobegon," and I would start in to do the monologue.
And he'd say, "Go get him, Gunner," and Gunner would go down the hole and dive. And while he was down there, then of course Mr. Peterson would take a snort of scotch.
Saturday is a lot more leisurely now that we have that. We're doing that Friday night show. It makes a huge difference. I mean, in effect, you workshop the show on a Friday night, which we never did for years and years and years.
Mr. Peterson got his bait ready to start fishing, and before he could put the bait in, this big snout came up the hole in the ice. The big musky Pete was there, and he was looking around, and he saw Gunner, and he dove back down. He dove back down, and then his tail came up and wagged in the hole in the ice, a sign of contempt, if you ever saw contempt. That dog just went wild. He dove at that fish, and he grabbed hold of him, and he hauled him up on the ice, and they rolled around there for a while, and that fish was just too big for Gunner. He swallowed Gunner. And the two of them died together, one encased in the other. It was a double suicide.
And they die. Well, that's not really a great end of a story. It's interesting, but then you sleep on it overnight, and the story starts to develop tendrils.
The next year, there was a different species of fish that showed up in that lake. Nobody had ever seen this before. It was a variety of dogfish.
And it has a big black nose, and it has a kind of a long tail, and it has little claws on its fins.
And it was a fish that could smell whiskey.
Now you can start to tell where this story is going to go.
We didn't notice that these dogfish were scratching away at the ice right below this until suddenly that ice started to tilt. It started to tilt, and we got out of there as fast as we could, out the door, just as that ice...
It doesn't bother you when you start out telling lies. You know, you're just grateful to be able to get through them without fainting up here. But when you become as accomplished a liar as I am, then you're troubled by inaccuracies in your lies. Because, see, the reason that you tell lies about a wonderful place is that you believe that if you get every detail right, absolutely right, and every character in that story has exactly as many hairs on his or her head as she's supposed to have, that if you get it absolutely perfect, that you will be lifted up out of this life and you will be set down in that wonderful place that you've told lies about, and all your lies become true.
Gonna get along without you now. Got along without you before I met you. Gonna get along without you now. Gonna find somebody twice as cute, 'cause you didn't love me anyhow. You ran around with every girl in town. You didn't care if it got me down. You had me worried, always on my guard.
It's not a great festive moment when you turn 65. Let me tell you, it's like walking into a brick wall.
Get along without you now.
Thinking back on your long, messy life and all the parts of it that you wish you could rewrite. And then you look down at your little child, and you realize that you cannot possibly regret anything in the whole complicated chain of events that led to the existence of this child. And so, you turn to the future, which is where you should be looking anyway.
Gonna get along without you now.
Can you get that, please? Thank you.
No, you got it. You got it.
Bye, Daddy. I love you.
Well, it's by the feel of the air, I suppose, and the way the clouds are going and the wind.
Great big dark clouds overhead. How exciting, just how exciting.
A Prairie Home Companion coming to you live in the rain here in Lanesboro, Minnesota, from the softball field. Well, it rains on the rich and the poor. It rains on the good and the bad alike. It rains on all of us.
You'll never know, dear, how much I love you. Please don't take my sunshine away. The other night, dear, as I lay
Now that I'm the age that I am,
I dreamt I held
I find myself less interested in the adult world. I feel myself going back to the ravine and going back to that sort of loose, dreamy feeling that you had when you were 12 and 13 years old.
I met this woman who shared an umbrella, and here's another who gave me a bouquet. Oh, today it's not raining whatsoever. You just made this a sunny day. You are
We see the world clearly when we're children, and we spend the rest of our lives trying to remember what it was we saw.
When skies are gray, you'll never know, dear, how much I love you. Please don't take my sunshine away.
I had a whole bunch of mothers. They were called aunts, and I had about 10 of them on my dad's side of the family and about 12 on my mother's side. My Aunt Evelyn used to live up the hill in a stucco house with the little lawn ornaments in front, the little chipmunks, you know, and the plaster gnomes and the cast iron deer and the plywood cutouts of fat people bending over. Bird bath and back, couple of lawn chairs, and way in the back her garden, pole beans and cucumbers and tomatoes every year, left to right. When I think of kindness, I think about my aunts who looked out for neglected kids, for the runts and the orphans and the odd ducks, and bestowed favors on them, who extended themselves to strangers. She was a tall woman, angular. She was a walker. She was a beautiful woman, 82 years old when she died. High cheekbones, as if there was maybe some Ojibwe in there somewhere. She cut her hair very short. She got old, very gray and cut like a man's. People didn't know what to think of her, but you know, after you reach the age of 70, it just doesn't matter so much. She lived in that stucco house alone after she kicked Uncle Jack out about 15 years before.
I could see the sun setting down on town.
Their hearts went out to the lonely and the grieving
They did not let shyness get in the way of charity. They did not permit bullies to tromp around unimpeded. They abhorred cruelty. It offended them deeply.
Can't you see
That spirit runs deep in this country, I do believe. Great empires rise and fall. The famous come and go. Cities boom and then they languish. But kindness is a constant presence in America. In the same spirit, I walk around St. Paul and I think, this is a great country, and it wasn't made so by angry people. I love this country, which is one of those simple, dumb discoveries that a man makes. Like the night I came out of the hospital in New York City, where I, standing beside my wife, had held my naked newborn 6-pound daughter in my hands. And I walked around town, stunned by the fact that what I had seen was so utterly ordinary. Everybody comes into the world pretty much like that. I was afraid of living an ordinary life. And I realized that's what we all get. We all get an ordinary life. And it's good enough. It's good enough.
Beautiful harmonies I'm hearing.
Garrison Keillor, The Man on the Radio in the Red Shoes, is available on DVD for $26.95. To order, call 1-800-336-1917 or write to the address on your screen.
Thousands of naked men and women dancing for your entertainment pleasure on videos and DVDs.
I was hired by the Minnesota State Fair to provide security for Minnesota's largest pig, Pretty Ricky, a 1,200-pound porker in the swine barn.
You were born in Anoka, Minnesota.
Anoka, Minnesota, right there where the Rum River flows into the Mississippi. You must have looked at that place on the map often and tried to imagine what life was like there.
What is a Saturday night like?
Anoka, A-N-O-K-A, Anoka, Anoka, yay, team. And as we say in Lake Wobegon, it could have been worse.